Hey, what's up guys? Troncoso here, back at you again with a brand new zombies video, and today's one is special because this marks the beginning of my brand new countdown series. For those of you who are unaware, in my channel update video from last week, I explained that I wanted to start making top 5 and top 10 videos on this channel, and that you could expect to see some new content on the channel soon. So, here we are. The first of what I'm hoping will be many top 5 and top 10 countdowns, and to start the series off, I decided to go back in time a bit and count down my 5 least favorite bosses and special enemies in Call of Duty Zombies. Now just a heads up and a bit of a spoiler alert, I am not going to be including any bosses from Black Ops 4 in this list simply because I don't like that game at all, and let's be real, who actually does? Other than that game though, along with the other non-Treyarch zombie modes, there will be a boss in every other game that will be on this list, or at the very least will be mentioned. And finally, I just want to bring up the fact that this list is just my opinion, and that over the years of playing, my opinion has changed several times, and that my list may be different than yours. So if you think I left a bad or annoying boss off the list, feel free to share your thoughts with me in the comments section. But with all that being said, let's get into the top 5 worst bosses in Call of Duty Zombies. So coming in at the number 5 spot, I decided to go with the Cold War Plague Hounds. Now, admittedly, picking the boss for this spot was sort of a challenge for me because I had like 5 different bosses that I thought could go here, but after a bit of thinking, I decided that the Plague Hounds from Cold War on D Machine and Outbreak were deserving of this spot. Now, I know if you haven't really been playing Cold War Zombies or at all, you might be scratching your head right now. Really, man? Out of all the bosses in Zombies, you're choosing Hellhounds? Now, let me explain. In Cold War, yes, Plague Hounds are just reskins of the Hellhound, which is one of the easiest bosses to kill in the whole series, but in Cold War they have a couple of unique traits. First off, they're super fast, and they constantly disrupt you when you're training. Hellhounds are fast too, but for some reason in this game they feel like they're even faster than in the older games, and they can hit you from just stupid distances. Like sometimes it almost feels like they have the Commando Pro perk from Modern Warfare 2, shout out to any of you guys who actually remember that, and it's very noticeable, especially like on D Machine because the training spots and the map is just so much smaller compared to Outbreak and Firebase Z. So if you're about to go down or you're at low health, these things are actually a legitimate threat to your game. But the main reason Plague Hounds are so annoying to deal with, for me at least, is that when you kill them, they release this mist of Nova gas similar to the crawler zombies from Kino and a few other maps, and they also leave behind a toxic pool on the floor that can damage you when you walk over it. And luckily these two effects are only temporarily, but they're still annoying to deal with when you're camping or training because of the fact that you can take a considerable amount of damage from them. But on the other hand, the zombies will barely take any, if at all. Now, back in the day, I hated Nova Crawlers, and I still do. But even though they were annoying, I could at least give them some credit because their gas explosions could actually kill some of the zombies in your train. The Plague Hounds explosions will barely affect them at all. But yeah, I put the Plague Hounds in the number 5 spot, not so much because they're a pain to deal with, but rather they're just really annoying. And they aren't even original bosses for that matter, but rather a different version of the oldest boss in Call of Duty Zombies. Coming in at number 4, we have the Denizens from Transit on Black Ops 2. Now, I don't think I'll have to explain why these things are on the list to most people who've played Transit, but there's so many people who either were living under a rock at the time that Black Ops 2 was in its prime, or were very lucky and didn't have to experience playing Transit back in the day in the first place, so I'm just going to explain anyways. Denizens are on this list because they're just flat out terrible. Let's put it like this. Let's say you're playing Transit and you manage to get the power turned on, which keep in mind is a bit more complicated on this map, and can take a decent amount of time. Knowing this, you'll probably sprint off the bus as soon as you arrive at the power station in order to get it turned on in time, so that way you won't miss the bus before it leaves for town. But sadly, this time around, you just barely miss the bus on the way out from power. You probably don't have a good gun, you definitely don't have Juggernaut or a good melee weapon like the Bowie knife or the Galvanuckles, so what does that mean? That means that you will have to run from power to the town in the fog, which contains Denizens. As soon as you enter the fog, the Denizens will attack you by jumping onto your face and scratching it to the bone. When you're being scratched, you can barely move, and the only ways to stop them are either by knifing them or shooting them. And if you don't have any ammo, which let's be honest, you probably don't, have fun smashing your melee button for the next 2 to 3 minutes while you're trying to get to the town, assuming by now you're still going in the right direction because the fog has such poor visibility. And even worse, the Denizens don't give you any reward whatsoever, and apparently according to the developers over at Treyarch, Denizens were only added to the game because they needed something to slow the player down so that way their games wouldn't lag as much and possibly crash on the old gen consoles. Wow. Let's just move on. I don't want to keep reliving Transit PTSD from my youth. Coming in at the number 3 spot, we have the Thrashers from Zetsubo no Shima. Now, I'll probably be the first person to tell you that I actually really like Zetsubo. In fact, it's among some of my favorite Black Ops 3 maps. But even though the map is great in my opinion, it definitely has its fair share of annoying features. For some people, they might say that they hate the longer setup process, the amount of doors on the map, or that the wonder weapon is sort of underwhelming. But for me, my biggest problem with the map is the Thrasher. Being one of the two bosses on the map, the other being the Spiders, Thrashers sort of take on that role of a Panzer or a Margwa in the sense that it's the beefy mid-round boss on the map that adds some chaos to your game and is there to kick your ass. Now, generally speaking, these types of bosses are often beneficial to the map because they provide the player with a nice challenge and they usually reward the player once they're killed. For example, when you kill a Margwa on Shadows of Evil for the first time, it'll drop a part for the Apothecant Servant, which is one of the greatest wonder weapons in all of zombies. However, unlike the Margwa and the Panzer, the Thrasher gives you nothing.
Oh, you get nothing! You lose! Good day, sir!
Not even points. They literally don't reward you at all, and on top of that, several of them can spawn per round, and they only increase in numbers the higher you go into your game. And also important to note is that their health increases the higher you go up. So once you're past the mid-30s, these things become a pain in the ass to kill efficiently, so unless you're using the Skull of Non-Stopway or the upgraded KT4, have fun trying to kill one of these things on a high round. Now, if Thrashers gave you like 1,000 points when you killed them, they would be a lot better in my opinion because, as you guys know, Zetsubo has a lot of doors to buy, so I think if this was a thing, the early rounds on the map and the overall setup process would be a lot faster, but seeing as they give you
nothing!
And they really aren't even as intimidating as the other mid-round bosses, I'm not really sure what they add to Zetsubo other than being really annoying and being branded as the Shrek of zombies. Coming in at the number 2 spot, we have the Space Monkeys from the map Ascension, and let me make one thing clear, I hate these things. In fact, I think I dare to say that they almost ruined the map for me. For those of you who haven't played Ascension before, once you have the power on and have purchased at least one perk, you'll soon start to come across monkey rounds. On paper, monkey rounds are pretty much Ascension's versions of dog rounds. At the start of the monkey round, several space monkeys will crash land onto the map and will then run to the nearest perk machine of a perk that you have equipped, and they'll beat the crap out of it until you lose the perk. Now obviously this can be very problematic and annoying because if you have more than 1 or 2 perks, you're likely going to have a really hard time trying to defend all of them, and more often than not you'll probably lose at least one of them. I have a problem with this because number 1, this type of thing discourages you from getting multiple perks, which can really destroy the replayability of this map, not to mention that Ascension is already a pretty boring map after a while of training. Now I know some people don't mind losing a perk because with the exception of Quick Revive, you can buy a perk back as many times as you want, so if you have the cash, this isn't really that big of a deal, but it's still annoying. Also, similarly to the Thrashers, the monkeys' health increases exponentially every monkey round, so eventually you're only going to be able to kill them with the thunder gun or the traps, which means that the higher you go, the more of a pain they'll be to deal with. But even though I'm heavily biased against the monkeys, to their credit, I will say that they can give you a free perk, but seeing as in order to get it, you can't let a single monkey touch any of the perk machines, it only really makes a free perk bottle obtainable if you have 1 or 2 perks, so this really isn't that much of a plus if you ask me. Alright guys, so before we get into the number 1 spot, I quickly wanted to give 3 dishonorable mentions to some bosses that I thought were also pretty annoying, but didn't quite make my list for one reason or another, so I'm quickly just going to explain my 3 picks here. First off, I chose the Valkyrie drones from Gorod Krovi. Now, these things I thought were always pretty annoying because they are pretty big and can block a lot of pathways, and because Gorod Krovi is a more close quarters map, this can be an issue from time to time. I also think they can be a bit beefy in the higher rounds, but the reason I kept them off the list is because the Ray Gun Mark III makes quick work of them on any round, so as long as you have that, these guys aren't that bad to deal with. Secondly, I chose the Witches from Buried. So I played Buried a lot back in the day, and I still have some minor PTSD from when me and the boys decided to go pack-a-punch our AN-94s and go through the Witches mansion. If you weren't around when Buried was new or haven't played Buried, Witches will take your points away from you if you get too close, which can be pretty frustrating at times, but the reason I decided not to put them on the list is because they are actually pretty avoidable, and if you have a good gun, it only takes like 1 or 2 shots to kill them, and on top of that, they give you a free perk, so if you manage to leave the mansion and reach the maze behind it, that makes them a really rewarding boss in my opinion, so that's why I didn't put them on the list. And the final dishonorable mention I chose were those weird ball things on Shadows of Evil that kind of act like the wraps from BO3's multiplayer because they roll towards you at a high speed and they explode when they come into contact with you. Now, they're pretty annoying because they can waste your Widow's blind grenades every time they hit you, and on the flag step of the Easter egg, they're literally the bane of my existence unless I'm running the Fear and Headlights gobble gun. But the reason I chose not to put them in any of the top 5 spots are because number 1, the flag step is one of the most adrenaline-inducing and fun steps in a zombie's Easter egg, so they definitely add to that. And number 2, the Apothecant Servant and the Sword are essentially always an insta-kill to them, so They're pretty easy to deal with, but anyways, with all those dishonorable mentions now out of the way, let's get into the number 1 spot. My least favorite boss in Treyarch Zombies. And coming in at the number 1 spot, guys, is the worst boss in Zombies. I decided to go with the Astronaut zombie on the map, Moon. This guy literally is the worst boss I've ever had the misfortune of encountering in Zombies. That's because he literally brings nothing at all to the table other than being a piece of. Now, I have to admit right now that if I didn't play Moon as much as I do, I probably wouldn't have put the Astronaut on this list, but after playing this map for hours upon hours, I can say now that this is easily the most annoying boss in Zombies, or at least on Black Ops 1, but even in Zombie Chronicles, he's still very irritating. If you haven't played Moon, what the Astronaut does is he'll slowly follow you around the map, and if you're misfortunate or gullible enough to get within reaching distance of him, he'll grab onto you, headbutt you, and take one of your perks while teleporting you with a red screen to a random spot on the map. If you're unlucky enough, he may teleport you somewhere on the map without any air or into a horde of zombies, which will likely mean game over for you. And if you're unlucky and he takes Juggernog or Speed Cola from you, that means you'll have to wait several rounds to get those perks back because you can only go to Area 51 once per round. So if you lost Jug, for example, and he took it on round 8, that means you won't be able to go back to Area 51 to rebuy it until about rounds 10 or 11. And if he does this while you're on a very high round or doing the Tunnel 11 strategy, you're going to be in some serious trouble. And even if you kill this guy several times, he'll just keep spawning in over and over and over again, only increasing in health exponentially each time he comes in. So that means that eventually he'll be nearly impossible to kill with regular guns, and because the wonder weapon of Moon, the wave gun, doesn't affect him, that means that there's only one effective way to kill him if you're playing Black Ops 1 Moon, which are the QED grenades. However, this can be an issue because that means you're going to have to sacrifice your Gersh devices to be able to kill him. This is why most players will resort to trying to trap him in Tunnel 6 or Tunnel 11 when the excavators are going off, so that way they won't have to worry about him in the later game. Luckily, however, in Black Ops 3, some angel of a developer over at Treyarch decided to make the Astronaut less of a pain by making Deadwire and Blast Furnace always an insta-kill to him on any round, which is extremely helpful and in my opinion was one of the best and most overlooked changes on the remastered Moon. So while I definitely tolerate the Astronaut much more on Black Ops 3 than on Black Ops 1, at the end of the day, that doesn't change the fact that this guy is still a piece of. He gives you no reward when you kill him other than making a small explosion, and he just keeps respawning every other round with the same goal, to steal your perks and to ruin your Moon experience. With all that being said, guys, this is going to wrap up today's top 5, but before I end it off, I just want to remind you guys that if you enjoyed this video, it would be greatly appreciated if you could go ahead and smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. I had a lot of fun making this video, and I would love to hear some feedback, so feel free to leave a comment. I'd love to hear your guys' top 5 worst bosses lists and maybe even some suggestions for future top 5s. But anyways, guys, thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. This is Troncoso signing off. Adios.